hasty sleep and a hurried breakfast, they loaded up the fried prawn seller's cart. He lent it to them because he was taking the day off, and trundled it through the streets to the royal park, where the displays were going to take place. The batik seller followed behind with another cart, and behind him came a sandalwood carver from down the street with a third, all laden with fireworks. But when they reached the ornamental lake, Leela and Lalclan stopped in dismay, for there was Dr. Puffnflash, supervising the final stages of putting together about 15 tons of equipment, all swathed in a neat tarpaulin and swarmed over by a dozen pyrotechnics and in white overalls with clipboards and stethoscopes. And next to him was Signor Scorsini, clambering about on a model galleon even longer than the royal barge, all bristling with cannons and flares, while his Neapolitan crew were arguing and gesticulating in a Neapolitan dialect as they lowered a vast, nodding, bearded model of King Neptune below the water. And next to him, Colonel Sparkington was rehearsing his display. There was a giant red, white and blue rocket with a saddle on the back of it, and on a scaffolding platform high above the treetops there was a model of the moon with dozens of craters all being loaded with exciting-looking things. Oh, it was too much. Lalcland and Lear looked at the vast displays being prepared by the other artists, and then at their 3 little cartloads, and their hearts sank. "Never mind," said Lalcland. "Ours is a good display, my love. Think of the foaming moss. They've got nothing like that." "Or the underwater fuse," said Leela. "Look, they're having to light that sea god by hand. We can do better than that, Father." "Of course we can. Let's get to work." They unloaded their materials, and the batik painter and the sandalwood carver took their carts back with the promise of free tickets to the show. The day passed quickly. All the firework makers were very curious about one another's displays and kept wandering over to have a look, with the excuse of borrowing a handful of red fire powder or a length of a slow fuse. They came to look at Lalcland and Lear's, and they were very polite, but it was plain to see that they did not think much of it. And all of them were desperate to look under Dr. Puffnflash's tarpaulin, but he kept it tightly tied down. Promptly at 7 o'clock, the sun went down, and 10 minutes later it was dark. People were beginning to arrive already with rugs to sit on and picnic baskets, and from the palace nearby came the sound of a bell and gongs and cymbals. All the firework makers were busy in the dark, putting the finishing touches to their displays, and they all wished one another good luck. Then came the roll of drums, and the palace gates were thrown open. By the light of 100 flickering torches, a great procession made its way to the grandstand by the lake. The king was being carried in a golden palanquin, and the royal dancers were swaying and stepping elegantly alongside. Behind them, decorated with gold cloths and jewels of every colour, with his tusks and toenails painted scarlet, came Hamlet. "Oh, the poor thing! He looks utterly miserable. I'm sure he's lost weight." "He's missing Chulak, that's what it is," said Lalcland. Hamlet stood disconsolately beside the grandstand as the king declared the competition open. "A prize of a gold cup and 1,000 gold coins will be awarded to the winner," the king proclaimed. "Only your applause will decide who has won. The first contestant will now begin his display." The firework makers had drawn lots to see in which order they would perform. Dr. Puffnflash was first. Of course, the audience had no idea what to expect when his mighty rockets whizzed up into the night sky, and his giant Bombardenorgel mit Sparkenpumpe began to play the ride of the Valkyries. Hurrying out great lumps of Teutonic lava, they all burst in oohs and ahs of excitement. Then came the highlight of his display. Out of the darkness arose a tribute to the king's favourite dish, a gigantic pink prawn, fizzing and sputtering, which began to revolve faster and faster and faster until it all went out in showers of salmon-coloured sparks and a sonorous chord from the Bombardenorgel mit Sparkenpumpe. The applause was colossal. "That was good," said Leela apprehensively. "That big prawn, really big and really pink." "A bit too obvious," said Lackland. "Don't worry. Nice pink, though. Must ask him for the recipe." Next to go was Signor Scorcini, with his Neapolitan pyrotechnicians. Red, green, and white rockets whizzed up in the air to explode with enormous bangs that echoed all around the city. And then the galleon came ablaze with sparkles and Catherine wheels, and a chorus of galley slaves made Roman candles move their oars stiffly to and fro. Suddenly a giant octopus rose up out of the water, waving ghastly green tentacles and attacking the ship. The sailors fired all kinds of jumping jacks and whizzers and incandescent fountains at it, and then they tipped cascades of Greek fire over it from barrels lashed to masts. The noise was indescribable. Just when it looked as if the ship was about to tip over, up came King Neptune, waving his trident, accompanied by 3 mermaids. The band struck up and the mermaids sang a jolly Euro song called Boom-a-bang-bang-a-bang. The octopus waved his tentacles in time and more rockets went off in rhythm with the music. The audience loved it. They roared with delight. "Oh dear," said Lackland, "that was very exciting. Oh dear, oh dear." But didn't you see how they had to light the fire? The sea god? Leela said. They had to wait till he was right out of the water, and a little man in the boat reached up with his match. Just wait until they see our underwater fuse. When the applause had died down, Colonel Sparkington's display began. First, a lot of saucer-shaped fireworks whizzed down from the darkness and landed on the grass. That got a round of applause on its own, because fireworks usually went up and not down. Then the famous moon swung into view, way up above the treetops, and Colonel Sparkington galloped in on a white horse made of tiny Catherine wheels, waving his Stetson hat to the audience, who were in such a good mood that they cheered and cheered and cheered. Leela could see an official besides the king counting the seconds that each burst of applause lasted. She swallowed hard. Then came the climax of Colonel Sparkington's display. After stamping out the flying saucers with his Catherine wheel horse, the gallant colonel jumped aboard the red, white, and blue rocket. An Indian chieftain galloped in on a pony and fired a blazing arrow at the tail of the rocket, which ignited at once and whooshed up along a wire to the moon, with the Colonel Sparkington waving his hat all the way. As soon as it landed, a dozen craters flipped open, and out came some little round-faced moon people with big eyes and pointed ears. The audience went wild. The moon people waved the flags of all nations and bowed to the king. Colonel Sparkington distributed rockets to them all, and they whizzed off in all directions, singing a song called Sparkington Forever. You could hear the clapping and cheering and whistling and stamping for miles around. Leela and her father looked at each other. There was nothing to say. But then they hugged each other very tightly and ran to their places as soon as the audience was settled again. They began their display. The first thing that happened was that little lotus flowers made of white fire suddenly popped open in the water, with no hint of where the fire had come from. The audience fell silent. And when the flowers began to float across the dark lake like little paper boats, they were completely hushed. Then a beautiful green light began to glow beneath the water and rose slowly upwards to become a fountain of green fire. But it didn't look like fire, it looked like water, and it splashed and it danced like a bubbling spring. And while the fountain played over the lake, something quite different was happening under the trees. A carpet of living moss seemed to have spread itself across the grass. A million little points of light, and so close together it looked as soft as velvet. A sort of came from the audience. And then came the most difficult part. Leela had designed a sequence of fireworks based on what she had seen in the grotto of the fire fiend, but it all depended on the delayed action fuses working as they should. And of course they hadn't had time to test them properly. If some of the fireworks went off a second too early or a second too late, the whole show would make no sense. But there was no time to worry about that now. Quickly and expertly, she and Lackland touched the fire to the end of the master fuse and held their breath. First came the series of slow, dull explosions like the beat of a muffled drum. Everything was dark. Then a red light shivered downwards, leaving a trail of red sparks hanging in the air, like a crack opening in the night. The solemn drum beats got louder and louder and louder, and everyone sat very still, holding their breath, because of the irresistible feeling that something was going to happen. And then it did. Out of the red crack in the night, a great cascade of brilliant red, orange and yellow lava seemed to pour down and spread out like the carpet of fire in the grotto. Leela couldn't resist glancing very swiftly over at Dr. Puffenflash, Senor Scorchini and Colonel Sparkington, and saw them all watching wide-eyed like little children. When the lava carpet had flowed down almost to the edge of the lake, the speed of the drumbeat got faster, and the sharp bangs and cracks beat the air between them. And suddenly, dancing as if he had in the grotto, Razvani himself seemed to be there, whirling and stamping and laughing for joy in the play of eternal fire. Both Leela and Lalkland forgot everything else and seized each other's hand and danced as well. Never had they produced such a display. No matter what happened, it was worth it. Everything was worth it. For a moment of joy like this, they laughed and danced for happiness. But their fire was not Razvani's, of course, and it couldn't last forever. The great red firework demon burnt himself out, and the last of the red lava poured slowly into the lake, and the little white lotus boats, now scattered over the water like stars in the sky, flared up and burnt more brightly than ever before, and all went out at once. There was silence. It was a silence that got longer and longer, until Leela could hardly bear it, and she gripped Lalkland's hand so tightly it nearly cracked.